Sitting in front of me is Melinda Cilento, who's the Chief Executive of the Committee for Economic Development of Australia, or CEDA, I'm going to henceforth call them. They've just put out a new report that is showing that we're not really generating many new businesses anymore, and the ones we are generating tend to be, well, just people employing themselves and no one else. More hustling than hiring. It's very good alliteration. It's not mine, it's CEDA's. Melinda, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
What have you found?
Yeah, look, we wanted to have a look at what was going on with the creation of new businesses in Australia. And the reason for doing that is because they're pretty important to our economy. New businesses starting is a sign of innovation, of new investment, creating new job opportunities. So it's pretty important for us that we see that trend improving. What we found was quite the opposite. It's been a long-term trend decline in the share of business owners in the workforce. And as you said in your introduction, we're now at a two-decade low in terms of the rate of creation of new businesses that employ other people.
So there are a couple of things there. It's a two-decade low, but it's also been building for 2 decades.
Yeah.
And so I'm a little torn here into which path to go down. Do we talk about current policy settings post-COVID? Victoria seems to be generating fewer than elsewhere. How much is this a contemporary Victorian government policy issue? And then if I look at it and go, well, it's been happening since the 2000s, have we just reached a point of structural stagnation that occurs in developed economies? I don't know which lever you want to pull, but I think we should do both.
Yeah, of course. I mean, firstly, the issue with Victoria, we saw prior to COVID that Victoria had one of the highest rates of business creation. So, still on a downward trend, but they were we're actually seeing greater job creation here relative to the rest of the country, and that's changed. And we've seen a drop off in both the rate of the creation of new businesses, but also in absolute terms, the number of business owners. So, there's a longer term trend, but there's something else going on here in Victoria just at the moment. The longer term trend, I think, really is important. And yes, you're right, it's happening elsewhere. We're sort of not doing well relative to what's going on in the rest of the world. So, it's a downward trend, but it seems to be...
what's the rest of the world there? Do you mean like economies?
Yeah,
or do
like
you mean...
economies.
Okay,
yep.
All right.
We're really trying to understand that. And this issue of business dynamism and actually declining business investment more broadly is a really sharp focus. And, of course, it tracks directly to the productivity conversation that economists and policymakers have been having for quite some time. So it's pretty significant. We think there's no single answer to it, but there's quite a few things that we can sort of unpack, if you like, in terms of reasons that we'd put our finger on.
As causes?
Yeah.
What do you think the dominant ones are?
Yeah, look, I think, again, it's probably no surprises, but when you talk to business across the board, regulation, the growth of regulation, not just the volume of it, but also the prescriptiveness of it. And we've done a bunch of work on this as well, and that's regulation within states and across the country. You hear it from all business, but if you're thinking of starting up a business, you can look at the regulation to get your doors open. That might be pretty easy, but the compliance burden to continue and to grow your business has actually been growing over time, and we think that's a real concern. Small business and start-up businesses, that's not where they want to be putting their energy and their focus.
No, they may not want to be, but at the same time, there is a public interest in regulation. We've seen what happens when you don't have it.
Absolutely.
I mean, I could look at any number of tech stories if you like. We could look at all sorts of things, where things go terribly wrong and people die even as a result of lack of regulation or nothing. So I guess what the question then becomes, what regulation are you talking about that is unreasonable regulation? Can you put your finger on that?
Look, I think, let me just take one step back and say, I completely agree with you around the value of regulation. And actually for small businesses, having really clear regulations and guardrails is helpful because you don't have to be thinking about it. You don't have to go, well, am I allowed to do this? Am I not allowed to do that? What we're seeing is, as I said, the sort of growing prescription of regulation and the compliance burden of it. So it's not just saying you can and can't do this or you have to do this. It's saying this is how you have to report on it. This is how you have to show that you're doing it. And there's some policies that will affect small business, but there's also, if you want to be a business that's supplying into a larger business, the growing requirements for them, and yes, it's on legitimate things, but whether it's cybersecurity or whatever, that you've got to sort of show that you're jumping through these hoops to supply to them as well, is something that we need to sort of have a look at.
But is this a consequence of unreasonable regulatory demands because that's just the political proclivities of the governments of whatever day in whatever place? Or are we talking about that just being the inevitable consequence of a hugely complicated, I mean, you mentioned cyber.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, that's mind-blowing, the complications that adds into our lives. Arguably, it requires this sort of regulation.
Absolutely. And again, I think what we've seen over time is an increasing recourse to regulation as the solution. Right. Often increasingly rushed in response to something that's happened, without proper consultation, and then without thought to, or how's this adding to, or replacing it? Is replacing, is adding to? How is it actually impacting business? And there's plenty of data around that shows that the compliance burdens are growing and are now quite significant. But that's just one issue. I think one of the other things that we've pointed to is, do people wanting to start up small businesses, or start a business and employ people, what's their access to capital? And many people starting a business don't have recourse to a lot of tangible assets, often look to borrow against their home. If you see home ownership declining, that's a challenge.
Yes.
Right. And so how do we make sure that we've got all the channels of financing available, and are we doing the right things in terms of venture capital, for instance, and do we need to be doing more there? So there's just a couple of things I'd highlight. There's a few others that we sort of call out in the report. But
yes. Can I just very quickly, I just want to do one more issue with you because I got this interesting text. Business owner here, forget government settings or this red herring about regulation or compliance. It's large businesses hoovering up everyone's spare cash and no one has anything left to spend. You in your report do talk about market concentration.
Absolutely.
Basically these big behemoths that crowd out smaller businesses. Short of breaking them up, what can you do?
Yeah, I mean, we do call out the importance of having an environment which enables competition. Competition policy is a really strong focus here in Australia. It's actually a strong focus everywhere, as we've seen businesses of scale and technology sort of enables scale to a greater extent. So we need to absolutely make sure we get those settings right, making sure that new businesses can come in, create the products and services that challenge existing incumbents, and actually better meet the needs of customers, or identify new products and services that people are looking for. So 100% agree.
Got our work cut out, it sounds. Melinda, thank you.
Absolute pleasure.